webinar to send out later today. If you have any questions, please make sure to type them into the question box. I'm going to be monitoring those throughout the webinar, and Darian will be taking your questions. Please make sure to follow us on social media. You can follow Kimbia at Kimbia Inc., and you can follow Darian at D. Heyman, as you can see on his presentation. So we are very lucky to have with us former executive director of Craigslist Foundation and best-selling nonprofit author Darian Rodriguez-Heyman. Take it away.
Thanks so much, and thanks to the whole team at Kimbia for hosting today's program, and to each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. My name is Darian Rodriguez-Heyman, and I'll be with you for the next hour. And in that time, my goal, just to be really upfront about it, is to make sure that, yes, hopefully you leave a little bit inspired as it relates to fundraising and year-end and embracing mobile, but more importantly than leaving you inspired, my goal for this talk is to leave you inspired to action, meaning what can you do differently an hour from now that puts you in a better position to raise more money for your cause, and really embrace the huge opportunities presented to any and every nonprofit through mobile technology. So let's get into it. First off, just a little bit about myself. You heard that, I started my career in social impact about 20 years ago as the executive director of Craigslist Foundation. I think more importantly, that's really where I discovered my life's work, which is helping people help. So I work with folks just like you and help connect you to the best practices, helpful resources, and connections that you need to maximize impact. I do that in a couple different ways. I'm an executive coach and consultant with a focus on fundraising, board development, and leveraging technology. I'm also a part-time executive director for New Me Organic Tea for their corporate foundation, with a focus on providing access to clean water in farming communities around the world. And I do quite a bit of public speaking and webinars like we're doing today. Previously, in addition to my role at Craigslist, I started the world's only conference series devoted to social media for social good, as well as a social enterprise called Sparrow that partners with nonprofits that are serving the poor in order to eradicate cycles of poverty. So they, to this day, still distribute free smartphones to the homeless, refugees, foster youth, folks like that, preloaded with apps to help them find jobs, housing, and access social services. I'm also an author, as Kelly mentioned, and I've written a couple books, both of which are very comprehensive and incredibly practical. Nonprofit Management 101 is sort of covers the entire spectrum of issues facing nonprofits, from operations to technology, fundraising, boards, marketing, you name it. And Nonprofit Fundraising 101 really dives deeper specifically into fundraising. So the sections there are on online giving, where you'll find the chapter on mobile, as well as chapters on crowdfunding and social media, but also sections on grant funding, corporate giving, earned income, etc. And a lot of the tips and the tools that I'm going to share today are really lifted from Nonprofit Fundraising 101. So if you're interested, you can find either of those books on Amazon. And also I know that Kimbia has graciously agreed to donate 5 free copies of my new book, Nonprofit Fundraising 101, to randomly selected attendees today. So hope that is of interest. And we will get started. It looks like there might be some audio problems, so I'm going to keep going. Hopefully those are going to sort themselves out. But if that's not the case, then let me know and I can try to get the audio back on track. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I do want to start with just a couple quick comments on why mobile really represents a big opportunity for any nonprofit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Obviously, you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us today, and you probably wouldn't be doing that if you didn't appreciate that this was a priority. So I won't spend a lot of time there, but I do think there's a few important points of context that I want to share. And where we're really going to spend our time today, especially given that the year is almost over and we've got the biggest fundraising opportunity of the year for nonprofits coming up here in the month of December. So what I really want to focus on is offering some really concrete and practical tips and tools that you can put to work immediately to help you raise more money by the end of the year, capitalize on this time of year, and also capitalize on the opportunities presented by mobile technology. So let's get into it. And I should just really quickly underscore one of the comments that Kelly mentioned in her intro. Unlike most speakers, that prefer you wait until the end to ask all your questions. I'm really here to serve you. And so if anything that I say is not crystal clear, or if you have questions about how it applies to your organization, then by all means, please feel free to use the question function of the app, and I will stop a few times over the course of today's workshop in order to field questions. So like I said, let's start out with a couple quick points of context. Why is mobile a big deal, and why should nonprofits care? I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but a few important things to note. Number one, smartphones and mobile phones are the most ubiquitous device in the world, in human history. To put it simply, more people have access to a mobile phone than to a toothbrush, or even to a toilet. So this is something that is totally ubiquitous. It is in all corners of the globe. And in many countries, there are more mobile phones than people at this stage. So this is a hugely powerful tool from a standpoint of meeting your donors where they're at. And where they're at is increasingly on their phones. Most people cannot even go a single hour without checking their phones. And 92% of people sleep with their phones in arm's reach. So this is literally a tool that we are connected to by the hip. And if you look at mobile's contribution to web traffic, you see that these numbers just keep growing year after year. And today, on average, your nonprofit probably is seeing about 35 to 40% of its web traffic coming from a small screen. And if the people that are accessing your site and your donate page through their mobile devices do not have an optimized experience, and if you're not implementing some of the tools that I'm going to share today in the next hour, then you are losing out on those people. They're probably going to leave and they're not going to come back. And this is something that is becoming increasingly important. Again, if you look at the numbers using a free tool like Google Analytics, you will see on average that about 35 or 40% of your website traffic is already coming from mobile users, and that number is going up each and every month. So again, the idea here is you've got to meet people where they're at, and where they're at is increasingly on their phones and increasingly on smartphones. Now, what are people using their mobile devices for as it relates to nonprofits? About a quarter of people are using it to discover nonprofits they didn't already know of, and they're using it to donate. About a quarter of people have actually donated through a mobile device. They're also sort of looking, doing a little bit of research, contacting nonprofits. And what we're seeing increasingly commonplace is this notion that I call surround sound philanthropy. Even if someone is not comfortable donating through their phone or even through your website on a computer, odds are, even if it's an older person that wants to send in a check for a direct mail campaign, they're still going to take a look at your website, perhaps through their phone. And so even if they don't transact there, it's still going to be an important piece of information for them. And that is going to be really critical, that you show up with a good presence, that it's optimized, and that you give them the information that they need to feel comfortable donating. Really, really interesting. And if you look at the data behind this, what's fascinating is a lot of nonprofits, when it comes to expanding their presence into social media and the internet in general, or on mobile devices, a lot of the senior management and the older folks will sort of get scared and say, oh, well, we don't want to cannibalize our direct mail campaign or our other fundraising efforts. And all of the research I've ever seen from Blackbaud and others shows really clearly that, on the contrary, when you layer in additional media like mobile, like social, like online, not only will your traditional like direct mail efforts not suffer, but they'll actually benefit as a result. This is that surround sound philanthropy concept. And as long as all the messaging and the imagery and the fonts and things like that are integrated, so it's one cohesive message, everything is going to do better as a result. Now, we're here to talk about year-end fundraising. And the thing that's really important that you know right off the bat is year-end fundraising already started. As far back as going from August to September, we saw a 30% increase in donation-related searches. So people are already planning their holiday giving, and it's really critical that you show up and that you meet them as they come to your website, especially through a mobile presence. And if you look at the numbers, on average, about 30% of all nonprofit donations for the year take place in the month of December, and a third of those happen in the last 3 days of the year. So we have a huge, huge fundraising opportunity coming up, and we got to be ready for it. You should also know, especially if your nonprofit has embraced social media and you've got a Facebook page, a Twitter profile, whatever the case may be, that when people access the web through their mobile device, they spend about a third of their time on social media. And not only that, but when they access social media through their phones, they're a lot more generous, meaning they're twice as likely to share content that they engage with. Whether or not you want to believe it, we've entered the attention economy where the currency is likes, comments, shares, and retweets. And people that access the mobile web and social media in particular through their phones are going to be twice as generous with those shares. So that presents a really big opportunity. Now, bringing it into sort of what your nonprofit can do to capitalize on this opportunity, the first thing that's most critical is that you recognize that social media is basically a Swiss Army knife. Similar to mobile, social, mobile, the internet, these are all communication platforms and tools. And they can be used for lots of different things. So yes, of course, you can use mobile and social and online as a fundraising channel to bring more money into your organization, but you can also use it to get people out to the polls or to educate them on different issues facing their communities, to market your cause, to recruit and manage volunteers, and to create efficiencies within your organization, to manage your clients, etc. And so being really clear on what your goals are is going to be your first tip for success. And with that, let's get into the tips and tools, the things that you want to keep in mind as you embrace mobile, as you gear up for year-end fundraising, so that you can be set up for success. And building on that last slide where I talked about this notion that mobile is a Swiss Army knife, the real question is, what do we want to use it for? And when I was at Sparrow, we created this really simple tool that I'm happy to email out to anybody who finds it helpful, called the Mobile Matrix. And what you see here is just a super simple spreadsheet where we talk about what are our goals, what are we trying to achieve, and at the top, the columns and those headers are with whom are we trying to achieve those goals. So, the notion here is, are we trying to raise more revenue from our donors? Are we trying to more efficiently manage our volunteers or better communicate with our clients or better serve them, right? And so the idea is you would sit down with your management team with this simple spreadsheet and you'd look at each cell and have a conversation. And you can simply put a check in the boxes that are important, or in an ideal world, you would rate them 1 to 10. And so you can very quickly identify what are our most pressing objectives, what are our priorities, because ultimately form follows function. And the notion here is you want to be crystal clear on what your most pressing goals are so that you can craft a strategy around that, as opposed to trying to achieve all these goals simultaneously, and you sort of dilute your efforts versus going deeper versus wider. So again, happy to email out a free copy of that to anybody who's interested. Now, as it relates to getting your mobile website ready for mobile, right? The thing that you want to keep in mind here is, first and foremost, your first step is going to be to figure out, are we typical? Are we common and average? I already said that on average, about 35 to 40% of your website traffic today is probably coming from mobile users. Well, you want to probably get a little bit more specificity there. And your first order of business is to figure out, hey, maybe our audience is only 10% mobile because we're, marketing to older folks, or maybe we're 70% mobile because we're dealing with youth. Whatever the case may be, again, you can use a free tool like Google Analytics or their mobile performance report to get a clear sense of what percentage of your traffic is coming from a mobile device, a tablet, a phone, versus a computer. And if your number is a lot higher than the average, if you're at that 70% rate, then everything that I'm going to say today should be twice as urgent and as important to you. Because as I said, if people show up to your site, they have a bad experience, they're going to leave and they're probably never coming back. So you want to know how big of a priority this is. The second step that you're going to want to do is to ensure that your website is what's known as responsive. And responsive is just a really simple technical term that means there's a little bit of code under the hood that can tell what size screen somebody is looking at it through. and it resizes your website appropriately. So that people don't see a 1-point font or really tiny images that they have to zoom in to be able to see, or they try to click a hyperlink and they feel like they have fat fingers because, they click the link next to it, right? So that's step 2, is once we understand how big of a priority this is, let's make sure our site is responsive. And in particular, the most important pages of your site are the home page, where people are most likely to start out at, and the donate page. If someone's clicking the donate button and they want to give you money, the last thing you want is a really poor displayed form that's going to, cause them to leave and not come back. So those are the 2 most important pages. The good news here is, to the extent you're working with third-party providers, most of these players are already taking care of this for you. On the website front, if you have a CMS, a content management system, like WordPress or many others, then odds are this is happening automatically. But either way, after we're done with today's program, I really encourage you to take a minute and go to your own website on a mobile device, on a phone, and on a tablet, and just make sure that it looks okay. And if it doesn't for any reason, contact your webmaster or your IT person and make sure that you figure out what the problem is and how you fix it. Because it's usually not that complicated. It could just be as simple as flicking a switch, literally, to make sure that people coming to your site through mobile devices have a positive experience. And then on the donate side, if you're working with Kimbio or another platform, most of them are pretty embracing of all sorts of trends, including the fact that mobile displays need to be resized appropriately. So take a look at both of those and make sure you're set up. And like I said, make sure your imagery and your messages are integrated across platforms. Your direct mail campaign should look and feel like your website and look and feel like your social media presence. All of these things need to be integrated so that the user, so that the donor has a common experience across all these platforms. And when you do that, as I said earlier, every one of them will benefit as a result. Now, let's also bear in mind that when we talk about mobile devices, and in particular phones, especially here in the US, we're really talking about smartphones, right? As far back as 2013, smartphone sales eclipsed traditional phone sales. So almost everybody at this point is looking at a screen and is able to surf the mobile web on a mobile browser. Now, because of that, as I mentioned, it's really critical that your site is responsive. If it's not, you're not going to be converting as many of the people that try to donate. If your website is responsive in your donate form, on average, at least a third more people are going to contribute. So this is some serious money, even though mobile only represents a single-digit percentage of overall giving in the U.S., it's growing really quickly, and you want to be well-positioned for that. And so we want to make sure the site's responsive, that's going to deliver higher conversion rates, and it's going to protect our downside. Because like I said, if it's not responsive, people are going to bail, and they're not coming back. Let's talk about the idea of establishing a mobile app. Oh, shit. Sorry. Yo! Sorry, my car just got broken into. Hey, Rose, your car just got broken into. It's right outside. You should call the cops, like, right now. Sorry, guys. That is a first. I just watched my car get broken into. Okay, so anyway, so you want to make sure that, when you think about, yeah, I'm standing looking right at the car as like 3 guys just broke the window. I'll figure that out later. Okay, so one of the most common questions that I get asked is, should we create a mobile app for our nonprofit? And the good news here is there's a really simple answer to that question, which is no. In every single case, literally 100% of the cases, you should be focused on optimizing your mobile website before you deal with your mobile application. And even then, once your site is set up, you want to bear in mind that you're only going to need an app if you have a strategy to both develop, maintain, and market it, right? Because you have to develop it not just for iOS, for Apple users and iPhone, but for other devices as well, like Windows. And you want to keep in mind that not only do you need to develop it, you need to maintain it as different iterations of those browsers come out. And finally, even if you do all of that, you still need to get it marketed to the community so that people actually download it. Give me 1 second, son.
Hey everyone, thank you for being patient with us and letting Darian step away for a second.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so in any case, so that's the importance of kind of holding off on the app. And in general, bear in mind that even once you have that developed, as I said, you need to market it, getting into the App Store or getting people to download it. If you have a lot of traffic coming through your museum or some other kind of a facility where you have a lot of foot traffic, then an app may make sense, especially if there's some compelling use cases. The good news about apps is once they're downloaded, people can have a really quick experience. They can interact with you even when they're offline. So there are some applications that can be interesting and important. But bear in mind, I talked about apps being pretty quick. This is important for your website as well, because in general, you have about 2 to 3 seconds. And if your website does not load in 2 or 3 seconds, people are going to leave and they're not coming back. This is especially true on a mobile device where people are even more pressed for time. And, again, we're in this attention economy. A lot of people also ask about text to donate. And this is a tool that can be effective if you're organizing a concert or you have a museum or something with a lot of foot traffic or a big event. But in general, it's not a great fundraising tool. It can be helpful from a fundraising standpoint. Why is that? Well, first off, most of us are not the Red Cross, where after the Haiti earthquake, all of the big cell phone companies waived all the fees. So there's going to be a high amount of fees. And also people tend to be limited. They can donate either $5 or $10, but they don't have too many options. They can't sign up as a recurring donor. And it's going to take on average about 3 months for you to see that money, because once they text to donate, they have to wait until they get billed by their mobile provider. Then they have to pay their bill, and then finally you get paid out. So again, not a great fundraising tool, but it can be a great way to start to initiate relationships with people, and then you can build on that. There's also a whole new generation of mobile providers that are out there that are basically, connecting people to the mobile web. So when they go to text to donate, it gives them a link, it takes them to your website, and then you can actually sidestep a lot of these barriers and issues. It looks like we do have a quick question here, so let me take that. And it looks like Carolyn is a board member of a small volunteer organization in the Latino community. You don't really have anybody who's a social media expert, and so in terms of where you should focus first, the thing to keep in mind there, Carolyn, is what you don't want to do, which is the single greatest pitfall that I've seen nonprofits fall into is what I call the empty store phenomenon. That typically looks like you have one volunteer or an intern who's there for a few months. They say, oh, Pinterest is the new cool thing. They set you up with a presence. They post regularly, and then they go back to school, or then they phase out for whatever reason. And then you're left with an empty store with nothing on the shelves. And just like you wouldn't want to open up a store on Main Street with nothing on the shelves, you don't want to set up a presence unless you're dedicated to maintaining some content there for at least a year. So what I would say is, in general, Facebook is now the equivalent of the world's largest country. Over 2 billion people have logged on in the last 30 days, on average 5 to 6 times a day, increasingly on their phones. And it's not just kids anymore. Women over the ages of 45 are the fastest growing audience on Facebook. And so Facebook is probably where you're going to want to start. Twitter is the second most popular, social network, hundreds of millions of people, and that's usually where you're going to go second. From there, there's lots of different flavors. Snapchat has a lot of young folks. Pinterest has lots of women. Instagram is great both for young folks and if you have lots of imagery, as is Pinterest. So it really does depend. But the main thing to keep in mind, Carolyn, is that you want to make sure that you're committed for at least a year. So with that said, I want to underscore the critical importance of having some kind of donation processing engine. And again, this is something that will power your website giving as well as mobile giving, since you want it all to be integrated. Ideally, like Kimbia, it's also a tool that can help you with peer-to-peer campaigns and crowdfunding, so you don't have to use different platforms to try to integrate those donor databases. And a couple things to keep in mind as you're selecting a platform and as you're using it. Number one is you definitely, as I said earlier, want to make sure that it's mobile compatible and that it will automatically make sure that your website is responsive, especially the donate form. You probably are going to be in the position of getting to customize your donation form. And you want to bear in mind, even though there's lots of information you may want to ask, for every field that you add to the donation process, you're going to lose 2% of those people. 2% of the people that have clicked donate, they want to give you money, but because you're asking too many questions, it's the equivalent of them coming into your store and filling up their shopping cart, but because the line's too long, they bail and they leave. You don't want that to happen. Get out of your own way. And also bear in mind that nobody likes to be treated like an ATM. So in an ideal world, you're communicating with people at least 7 times in between asks. That's not to say that your newsletter might not have a donate link, but it's not the primary reason that you're getting in touch. And so the idea here is you want to map out these 7 different touch points, including saying thank you for the gift, including following up and asking things like when's your birthday or which of our programs are you most excited to support. And then you can customize information based on that. But anything that you don't need to ask in the donation form, save it for later. And then finally, in terms of keeping it simple, streamlining the donation process and getting out of your own way, I'd like to assign each of you a little bit of homework later today, which is go to your own website and try to donate from every page in your site. And here's the key. If it ever takes you more than 3 clicks to donate, then you need to revamp your site and streamline it. Because I promise you, if you look at the numbers using Google Analytics or Web Trends or another tool, what you're going to see is you're going to lose probably 10 to 20% of people at each click. And once you get up to the 3rd or the 4th click, you're going to start to lose about half of those people. Again, they get to the front of your store and the line's too long, so they leave. Don't let that happen. Get out of your own way and make it as simple as possible to donate from every page in your website. Make sure whatever donation platform you're using that you're set up to take recurring gifts, and ideally you're leading with the monthly giving option. And then as you see here on the bottom, it says or donate once. At the very least, you can kind of lead with the one-time gift option and make sure that there's an option to say sign up as a recurring donor. The point is your work is not going to stop tomorrow, and neither should their support. And if you look at the math, on average, a one-time donor is going to donate $82. That's the average one-time online gift, right? Compared to $22 a month for the average monthly sustaining member, right? And so the idea here is that within 4 months, you're going to bring in more money. And if you integrate it and take into consideration loyalty rates, right? Because on average, only about 1/3 of people who give one time are going to give again next year. Whereas 87% of the people who sign up as monthly donors will keep giving next year. Basically, people are lazy, and anything that requires an additional action is going to be fundamentally unlikely. So it doesn't take any more work to get people to sign up as a monthly donor, but you're going to get a lot more money. You might as well lead with that option, or at least promote it heavily and offer it. Now, one of the single biggest opportunities presented by online giving, mobile or just in general, is the opportunity to turn your donors into fundraisers. And most of the platforms like Kimbia out there will have a feature available that oftentimes is not automatically activated. And you want to make sure that you activate this feature, because this one feature alone, on average, will double your online fundraising results. And it's as simple as once someone actually donates through your site, whether it's through a mobile device or a computer, instead of just saying on that next page, thanks for giving, have a nice day, we'll send you a receipt, you want to say, thanks for giving, click here to share on Facebook or click here to share on Twitter. And when they do that, up pops a pre-populated message like this that they can just send as is, or they can customize. Now, first of all, this is the moment of truth. Someone just gave you money. That is when they are most connected to your work. So that's the time when they're most likely to tell their friends about you. Second of all, we professional fundraisers like to say that the most powerful form of ask is a peer ask. I invite you to join me in supporting the great work of Numi Foundation. I just gave and you should too. Here's a link. Right? That's the best way to raise money. It's part of why it's so critical our board members contribute so that they can be more effective fundraisers. But the point is, from an online giving standpoint, when you add this one feature and just activate it is typically all that's required, then not only are people going to donate, but when they do, some of them will tell their friends and invite them to follow their lead. That's going, in and of itself, is going to double the amount of funds coming into your organization. And perhaps more importantly, that extra money is usually not coming from people who are already connected to you, who already know of your good work, or are already supporters. It's coming from the friends of your friends, right? The friends of your supporters. So we're expanding our donor database and our number of prospects and supporters, and we're bringing in a lot more money into the organization. So make sure that you activate that social giving feature. Now let's talk a little bit about email, because most folks don't realize that, we already said that 35 to 40% of your website traffic is coming from a mobile device, but over 60% of emails are read on a mobile device and a smartphone at this point in time. So this is really critical. Everything I've talked about in terms of the importance of your website looking right to a small screen is doubly important for email. And why is that? Because again, just like your site, if it doesn't look right, people are going to bail and they're not coming back. They're going to unsubscribe. So in terms of your end of year fundraising campaign, what's exciting is that anytime you're raising money through a technology-based medium, you have an opportunity to really embrace the data instead of embracing your gut or your intuition. What does that mean? That means you should do some testing. Unlike the old days where Coca-Cola would do a bunch of focus groups to decide which ad to show during the Super Bowl, you can learn in real time. And so if you have a decent sized mailing list of at least 50 or 100,000 emails, what you can do, and unfortunately it doesn't really work for smaller lists, but if you have a larger list, what you can do is you can segment out, take 5 different slices of 1% of your list each and send a slightly different message to each of them, and experiment with different subject lines. Each of those 5 messages should have a different subject line, but also experiment with different copy and different imagery. And then you look at the actual data instead of thinking what you think is going to get the best response. See which email got the best open rate. That is your best subject line. And then you see which email got the best conversion rate of the people that opened it. What got the highest percentage of people to click donate or whatever that call to action is. That's your best copy and imagery. And you put the 2 of those together, and that's the email that you send out to the remaining 95% of your list. It takes a little bit of time and energy, but you're going to get a much better response to that end of your email campaign when you're trying to cut through the clutter of all these other emails that people are getting, encouraging them to donate around Giving Tuesday and the end of the year. Now, what time of day should you be sending out your emails? Well, interestingly, this is almost the opposite of when you should be posting to social media. With emails, the guiding principle is that you never want to be unread message number 38 out of 62 when someone gets back into the office Monday morning, for example. They go through their inbox just going delete, 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 right? So in general, you want to try to pop up at the top of their inbox, and the times you're most likely to do that are in the middle of the week, mid-morning or mid-afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. If you have a diverse audience that's national, 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 2 p.m. Eastern, can work really well. I mentioned this is the opposite of social media because with social media, it's more about what I call the burrito principle. You want to reach people in their downtime, which is usually during the week when they're on their way into work, 8 to 9 a.m. on the bus, checking out their smartphone, or during their lunch break, when they're eating a burrito, hence the name burrito principle, checking their iPad and looking at their Twitter feed. At the end of the day, when the boss ain't looking or they're on their way back home, or finally after the kids go to sleep, which typically is the best time of day to post. And then days of weekends tend to perform better because again, people have their downtime. Now, just as I said before, your mileage may vary. All of this stuff is just industry averages. So you should experiment and test with this stuff and see what actually works for your audience. And let me pause there and see if there's any other questions that came in. I do think I'm seeing the questions. But Kelly, any questions from your end?
There are not any questions at this time.
All right, great. Let me just quickly say that infographics can be really powerful. People love visual representations of data and taking statistics of impact or industry information and research and putting it in a visual way. There are lots of free tools out there that will help you do this. And as long as you're doing it during the end of the year, integrate a holiday theme. That can really help you cut through the clutter and get your message and cause the attention it deserves. Few specific tips that I want to share. Remember that you've only got a couple seconds for your website to load, and as soon as it does, you want to greet that person with something they care about, not what you care about. You want to add value to the people that are coming to your site, whether that's a powerful image, whether that's some useful information, whatever the case may be. And we also want to keep things simple, especially on a small screen. The old saying is that if you say 10 things, you say nothing. So pick one call to action and really focus your website and your mobile site in particular on that one call to action. If it is getting people to donate, make sure you have a donate button at both the top and the bottom of the page so that no matter where people are at, they can see that donate button. Right? Try not to cram too much in. Leave some white space. It's your friend, especially next to hyperlinks, so that as I talked about earlier, people don't feel like they have fat fingers and they go to click one link, but they hit the wrong one on accident. And photos and videos are absolutely critical. If you look at the numbers, a post to social media that has a photograph associated with it, on average is going to get twice the likes, comments, and shares, unless it's to Twitter, and then it will get 18 times the engagement. With videos, on average, a post with a video will get 4 times the likes, comments, shares, and retweets. Unless it's a crowdfunding campaign, a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, in which case, on average, a campaign with a video will raise 8 times the amount of money as a campaign that does not have a video associated with it. And that does not mean you need to hire Steven Spielberg and have a multi-million-dollar production budget to put together a feature-length film. It can be something super simple as long as it's authentic and it really shows the voice and the impact. And so to that end, I want to share just a quick example of a video produced by a 13-year-old girl, Sarah, about a cause that most people have never heard of, but this 13-year-old girl with no budget, which you can tell when you see this video, was able to raise $50,000 in 2 weeks with this video. Let's listen to Sarah. All right, hold on, let me tee this up. All right, so again, this is Sarah. She's only 13 and raised $50,000 with this video.
After crying, I am watching, your teardrops taste like silence, and you're sensing like we never had a flip. You have to
living it. I want to change that. Thank you for watching and caring about R&D. So that's Sarah, and that's the power of video, right? If a 13-year-old girl with no budget could raise $50,000 in 2 weeks for a disease that most people have never heard of, what can your cause do with all the assets you have at your disposal, right? And the thing to keep in mind is that people don't give to you because you have needs, they give to you because you meet needs. And that also, as Case Twinkle Grace loves to say as well, people don't give to you, they give through you. So you really want to use the power of photography and video to showcase the people that you help, to showcase the impact that their donation can unlock and make possible if they support your cause. Now, a couple other quick tips as we get ready to wrap up. Bear in mind that people are going to be looking at your site on a small screen, so your buttons, those call to actions, donate, etc., should be at least 30 by 30 pixels. As I said, you want to space out those hyperlinks so people don't feel like they have fat fingers. Use Google Analytics and the mobile performance report in particular to figure out what percentage of your traffic is coming from a mobile device and what kinds of mobile devices people are looking at your site through. To the extent you've got a lot of foot traffic, rather than going down the app or the text to give route, another option is to use QR codes that people can scan with a free app, and it'll take them to your mobile site right away. Can be really great for events and things with lots of foot traffic. And as you're looking at the analytics through Google Mobile Performance Report or some other platform, keep an eye on what percentage of your traffic is coming from a mobile device. To the extent that goes up significantly, it's probably going to rise every month. But you want to know about that so you can bear in mind how critical your mobile strategy is going to be. And also, over time, you're going to want to keep an eye on the conversion rates, the number of people that come to your site that actually succeed in fulfilling that call to action, for example, donating. Because if that number goes down real quick, all of a sudden, or if you see your bounce rate go up, meaning what percentage of the people that try to come to your site and leave before it fully loads, then odds are there's some kind of problem. Maybe some new operating system update is incompatible with your site, and so people are having a hard time accessing the site, or it's loading slowly. If that happens, either one of those, odds are there's a problem with your site, and you want to keep an eye on that so you can address it as quickly as possible. A couple of resources that I want to share as we get ready to wrap up here. My friends at Network for Good, who have processed over $1 billion of donations, billion with a B, of donations going to nonprofits over the last 10, 20 years. They've created a website called Fundraising 123 where they show all of the best practices and tips that they've learned with that huge amount of volume for best practices around online giving and mobile giving, as well as insights into social media. Great website. They also put together a really helpful newsletter with a lot of wonderful year-end content. Sparrow Mobile is that mobile company that I started that partners with nonprofits to eradicate poverty, oftentimes distributing free smartphones to help some of our most vulnerable populations escape cycles of poverty. Beth Cantor is one of my sheroes. She's an amazing public speaker and author. She wrote a couple books on the network nonprofit. She's also got a great website, newsletter, and social media presence where she talks a lot about mobile and social and online giving in general, as does Heather Mansfield, who has Nonprofit Tech for Good. Great website, great newsletter, great social media outlets. She's also written a couple books, including Mobile for Good. She's also, Beth and Heather are ones that I interviewed for my book on nonprofit fundraising on the social media and mobile chapters, respectively. Google, if you want to check out the Google Analytics or the Mobile Performance Report, all of the offerings that Google makes available to nonprofits for free or at a steep discount are promoted through google.com/nonprofits. And then finally, Let's All Do Good is a new startup that is working with nonprofits. They're mostly focused on the Boston market with their base, but they're starting to work nationally with groups. Looks like my thing just goes up. But Let's All Do Good is a great platform that works with nonprofits on a couple different fronts, really helping them to recruit volunteers. What they're doing is they're basically using the power of mobile to tap into location-based content. And so what that looks like is, hey, if we know that you are in our neighborhood and you're someone who cares about animal welfare, well, we can show you, content from our nonprofit that's focused on, a dog shelter, for example. So the idea here is that, unlike emails and things like that are less likely to get opened up, Let's All Do Good will actually push content to their phone. So all of a sudden they'll get a message just like a text that pops up on their screen, and that's going to have a much higher open rate. They do make the platform available for free to nonprofits. There are some additional sort of premium options like collecting donations that you do have to pay for, but just having a presence so people can learn about you and about your events and volunteer opportunities is available for free. And so with that, I really want to thank each and every one of you for your time and your attention today. I apologize for my little outburst when the car got broken into. That's kind of a first for me after doing dozens of these webinars. But I really just want to thank
it made it very exciting.
So let's take a couple quick minutes, see if there's any other questions, and if not, we can wrap up. And the other thing that I want to share is whenever I do a webinar, I always make a standing offer, which is that if any of the attendees are interested in a free pro bono consultation with me, I'm happy to set up a 15 or 20-minute phone call, find out a little bit more about your cause, share some best practices and helpful resources, and just kind of point you in the right direction. However I can. Of course, I also provide paid consulting and executive coaching services, but always happy to make those pro bono calls available to anyone who's interested, whatever your budget is. So I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so I think I'm just going to say thank you to each and every one of you. And, oh, go ahead.
Hey, Darian. I did have a question for you. I think I heard you say that mobile giving was still in the single digits for most organizations earlier in the presentation?
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out that we did a report at Kimbia on donations processed last year through our platform, and we actually found that between 20 and 30% of online donations were given through the mobile devices. So I think
sure, absolutely, which is pretty typical, actually. So the thing to keep in mind is that out of all donations to nonprofits in the U.S., only about 10% are online at this point. Again, that number is growing pretty quickly by about 9 or 10% a year. Giving through mobile and socials growing by about 50% a year. So, if you do the math, basically about 2 or 3% of your donations today are probably coming from mobile. But again, that number is growing each and every month. So it is a growing piece of, of course, it's a growing piece of online giving and of overall giving. Cool. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that this talk leaves you not just inspired, but inspired to action, as I said. And I really just want to end by thanking each and every one of you for your time and attention. And I want to thank you not only on behalf of myself and on behalf of our hosts at Kimbia, who graciously agreed to donate 5 free copies of my book to randomly selected attendees today, but most of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the thousands of people that you collectively serve. It's really been an honor to be with you today, and I hope you found today's program helpful. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Darian. Bye.